All right, when coming across landscape photographers, I noticed this Nadav Kander, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, was a landscape photographer. And I started looking at his work in a series called God's Country, which is Middle America. And I was looking for patterns, and I noticed a few. So I was going to use this as an example for how to critique and do an investigation of a photographer. So when you look at the work as a whole, one of the things that really struck out in the design wheel is the use of value. Value is the darkness and lightness of color. And basically what I noticed is that in all of the shots, a lot of them are what's known as a high key photography, where if you looked at the histogram, if you look at the pixels, most of the ones during the day are bright and slightly overexposed, which gives it a kind of a natural deserty look. I don't know how best to describe, how to better describe that. And again, the shadows and the light have a lot of interplay, so you have some darks contrasted by a lot of bright colors. And then the nighttime shots are kind of the opposite. They're more low-key, where everything's very, very low, and you're only seeing very small parts of the frame that are exposing. This is a really good example of another value photo where, and you can't even see the cursor, but 80% of this photo is all black, and all you're seeing is the streetlights, the truck, and then the ground. So that's a good, skillful use of value in this. The other thing I noticed in terms of elements of art is space. And the space is very vacant, and so this ties in to this element of art, the area around images, how the space is used. And again, these two together, especially if you go back to that truck photo, show that a lot of the space is empty. It's negative space to put some emphasis on, and this term, emphasis on the subject. So especially with that truck photo, you can see that space is used thoughtful in combination with value. The other thing that I see too as a common theme is a common principle of design being used is proportion and scale as well as balance. So when you're dealing with a large area of space and large scale of subjects, these two things really interplay well with this, and I think you'll find that they interplay with a lot of landscape photographers. Let me show you a few examples of what I noticed when I was looking at that. One photo that used balance and space very well, balance and proportion, is this. Maybe not so much proportion, but definitely balance, where you've got several elements and they all are weighted to where you've got the largest, closest Monument Valley rock here. You've got the person on the other side, and then you've got more in the background, and they really give you a sense that the photo's balanced well on left to right. Another one from this series that kind of jumped out at me, especially when it comes to proportion, and a lot of these I noticed they didn't have people in them. There's a good one for lion. But when they did, they used the people to kind of see scale. So this is a good example. All three of these are good examples of that. But I'm going to focus on this one. And notice how the camera is a far way away, and this little guy and the character really brings some sense of space and a sense of proportion to the rest of the scene. I know that this isn't as grand as the Monument Valley one, but you can see that here too, where the person standing on the edge of what looks like a diving board or a platform gives a sense of the size of the surroundings. And then one more that I feel was a good example of proportion. Is that a dinosaur? Yeah. So now we're seeing a cross and a dinosaur off in the distance. And again, whenever you have a small subject with a large background, you're really trying to show the scale, because without that reference point, it would be a lot harder for you to see how big the world around is. So that's it. Just one artist, one landscape photographer, one example of how you can critique and show how these things tie together.